Remember, in the course of discussing movies, the host will spoil plots. You've been warned. Listen to their screams. Greetings, ghouls and creeps, and welcome to Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast that feels like you're talking to friends. I am one of your friends, Dave. We're joined, as always, by our other friend, Ike. Ike, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain. Cannot complain. How are you doing?
I'm good. This is Saw X Week. It is
Mm-hmm.
coming out this weekend. I'm super excited. And, of course, we're all about the Saw franchise today. As this is our Saw franchise episode, we're going to talk about all 9 movies, and we're going to rank them based on our favorites. Again, this is just our opinions, right? This is just what we feel we enjoy the best. This is our cumulative ranking. So we'll get to that very soon. This is kind of our franchise episodes don't have a lot of the bells and whistles, a lot of the news and whatever. We get right to it because it's a lot to talk about. But before we get to that, let's touch on a few things. Thanks to our wives, as we always say, Monica and Kayla, for everything they do and all their support. We fully expect that next episode, when we discuss and review Saw X, we expect a wives rebuttal that week, because Monica has already proclaimed that she thinks she'll have some issue with our opinions on the Saw franchise. As in, she believes that we will be a lot more positive about the franchise as a whole than she is. So, I don't know. Stand by. We'll see what happens next episode with that. But before we get into the Saw franchise, I straight up, I didn't really watch a lot this week. I've had a crazy ass week. Work has just been killing me the last couple weeks. So I haven't had a lot of time to watch a lot. I did watch, damn, I can't remember the movie now. What was the movie you suggested to me?
Oh, the one on Hulu, No One Will Save
Yes.
You.
That's it. I watched that one. And I enjoyed that movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
That was fun. Monica watched a little bit of it. She didn't like it at all. But I did, man. I was watching this movie and I couldn't think, where do I know this actress from? Right? I thought, she was on the Tim Allen show. What was that show called?
Home Improvement?
No, the other one he did. Last
I
Man
know.
Standing.
Yep, Last Man Standing.
Yeah, she was on that. She played Eve on that, which I'm not a big fan of that show, or didn't watch it necessarily, but I've watched some. That's where I recognize it from. But I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was pretty fun. I'm always up and like a good alien movie. And I thought this one was well done. And Ike, I wanted to ask you, now that I've watched it and I look back, did this movie have any dialogue in it?
Wait, did it?
I don't think
I
it
don't.
did.
Yeah. No English dialogue, at least.
Right, there was alien noises. Sound stuff. But even some of the flashbacks, I don't know if there was any words spoken in this, and I'm not complaining about that because it apparently worked. I thought it was a fun movie though. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, no, like you said, I didn't watch a whole lot other than this, but I loved it. I thought it was really good. Honestly, it was very unexpectedly good. I watched it and I was very surprised by it, especially for it being like a Hulu original. Yeah, it was really like kind of a shocking like entry for me, especially for as far as streaming movies go. So, not a small spoiler just because I know some people, might watch this movie. So I won't give away the whole ending. But I definitely was not seeing where it was going, and
Yeah,
I was very surprised at the sort of the repeatedness of the ending and how it actually ended. Because I was definitely expecting her to die. I was
yeah,
like, oh, this is it. This is it. This has to be it.
yeah. It was pretty cool. It's pretty. I thought it was pretty original. I thought it was fun. Spectacularly acted, man. She's talented, man. She
Yeah.
was great. And I mean, because truth be told, she was the majority of the movie, right? There wasn't a whole
Yeah.
lot of other stuff. She shouldered the bulk of it, and that's just, I would think that would be tough to do, but she was great, and I liked it. I thought it was fun. It was a fun watch. Uh, Thoroughly enjoyed it. I remember hearing about it, and knowing it was coming, but then you mentioned it to me because I guess I didn't realize it was coming. Yeah, but I highly suggest people go out and rent out the Hulu and watch that thing. I got to think this is going to do well on the streaming platform. it's a pretty cool movie. So I guess that pretty much kind of wraps up what we watched. Then, since we both said didn't watch much else, but that was a good one. Like I said, I highly suggest people go out and watch it. But we're ready to jump. Then we're talking Saw franchise. It's all time for the Jigsaw and etc. I'm pretty excited. I'm so looking forward to Saw X. I tried to do a rewatch of the Saw franchise here recently. I only got through a few of the movies. Got sidetracked. Too busy. That's okay. But we're here for it. There's 9 movies in existence before this one, and we're going to rank our favorites and discuss them, and have all the facts and details. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to do that. We're going to talk the Saw franchise. So hang in there. Make sure you subscribe to Listen to Their Screams on your favorite podcast platform. Also, make sure you look us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok, and Slasher. All you have to do is look up Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2 and Screams, and you can find us there. Also, make sure you go and buy yourself a Listen to Their Screams t-shirt. You can find all of our shirts at tinyurl.com/Screams Shirts.
All right, and we are back, and we are starting off on a not so good. No, I'm kidding. Not a not so good note. But we're going to start off from the lowest ranked and go to our highest ranked. This is how we do all of our rankings. Since there are, of course, 9 of these movies, that means that we're going to be counting down from 9 to 1 in terms of which ones we, cumulatively thought were good, bad, not so good, whatever. And I'll be honest, some of these are not the best, but I would say for the most part, most if not all of these have redeeming qualities to some extent. So definitely, if we say one of your favorites is not so good, that doesn't mean we didn't like the movie. It just means that it wasn't our favorite. So keep that in mind.
This is just our enjoyment, right? What we enjoyed. I tend to think a lot in rewatch value when I do this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, what would I jump back in and just rewatch? Like we've said before, most movies I can find something I like in them. So that's not saying they're a horrible movie. Just because if a movie's ranked 9 doesn't mean it's necessarily say it's a bad movie per se. It's just of the 9, the one maybe we least enjoyed watching. So
yeah, absolutely. But all right, here we go. Starting us off at number 9, we have the most recent entry into this franchise, Spiral. This was released on May 14th, 2021, written by John Stolberg, directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, and starring Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson. This had an opening weekend of $8,750,034, and it was good for number 1 for the weekend during the pandemic. So, there are a couple of things I want to mention about this movie. Is that, first of all, it was released during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I think this is probably on the lower end of grossing movies for the Saw franchise.
Yeah.
And, it is what it is. I think that it probably could have used being pushed off a little bit longer, but I understand why they did what they did. But I think the reason that this is not more of a popular film is most likely due to COVID. And that's not even to say that this was a bad movie either, just because this is ranked number 9. Now, for people who maybe don't remember, this is not a direct entry into the Saw, current Saw Parthenon, or Pantheon, if you will. This is actually a book of Saw movie. So they came up with sort of this cool idea to sort of anthologize these movies, and there are still plans to do this more in the future. But basically, this is a copycat killer who is just copying some of the tropes and themes of John Kramer. This person has, as far as we know, no actual connection to John Kramer. But basically, this is we have Chris Rock. He is a detective, and he takes on a rookie cop detective type deal to be his partner. They start going through the motions, and a new jigsaw killer kind of emerges. All kinds of interesting traps and things like that. But honestly, Spiral has a really good message, in my opinion. It talks about a lot of the corruption and police work, and how when you do decide to be a good police officer, typically you are met with a lot of backlash and a lot of horrible things happening to you. So this does have a very prominent and good message, and a very important lesson to learn about our current society. It's just that this was not our favorite Saw movie.
Yeah. Again, I think that's part of it, right? It doesn't. it doesn't fit into the Saw series as directly as some of the others. So that I guess in viewing the series as a whole, that hurts it a little. Part of it, it's not that I don't dislike Chris Rock per se. This just kind of felt like an awkward role for him. I don't know how to put that. Right? It felt like a little out of his. I'm not saying Chris Rock's not talented or what have you, but you think Chris Rock, you think comedy, and it's a little odd to maybe see him in this role. And again, like you said, it was important to mention that this did come out during the pandemic because the weekend gross sounds very low. So you can take that with a grain of salt. To be fair, you can also take that it was the number one in the box office with a grain of salt. It's hard to judge, right? How what this would have performed. As you view the series in a whole, the series as a whole does very well opening weekends. So there's nothing to make you think that even in normal quote unquote circumstances, this wouldn't have still performed well, right? We've talked about how horror movies perform, but there is that asterisk to put on there. Again, the movie, it's not that I don't know. I don't, it's not a rewatch movie for me. I don't know, if I watched the series as a whole, yes, I would rewatch it to be in the series. And again, it is what it is. But if you take all 9 movies as a whole, yeah, it's probably my least favorite of the 9. And a lot of it does lean heavily into the fact that it is not directly tied into the rest of the story in the series. To me, that kind of hurts it when you talk about the world of Saw. So,
absolutely.
But I don't know. I don't know if I've ever really heard anybody that wants to die on the hill of Spiral and say, yes, this is a great movie. But
that's
maybe
a good point.
I mean, some movies that I don't like, there's people out there that love them. I don't know that I've heard that for Spiral. Maybe there is. All due respect, maybe there is. I don't know. Yeah. But that moves us on to our number 8 in our rankings. It would be Saw 5, released October 24th, 2008, written by Patrick Melton, directed by David Hackle, starring Scott Patterson, Costas Mandylor, and Tobin Bell. Opening weekend grossed $30,053,954, which was good for number 2 on the weekend. Ike, fill me in here. Saw 5, I'm having trouble. Again, these all blur to me for some reason, except the ones that I've rewatched more. It's Saw 5 is not one of my favorites. Help me catch up. Give me some gist of Saw 5.
Yep. So just for point of clarity, Saw 5 takes place after the end of Saw 4. Saw 4 and Saw 3 both take place at the same time, technically. Yeah. So Saw 5 is the continuation of Saw 3/4. Saw 4 ended with us learning that Detective Mark Hoffman is basically a disciple of John Kramer. And in the beginning of this film, we showed his name's he's FBI agent Peter Strom. He's actually locked into a unwinnable trap where he actually has to give himself a self-tracheotomy in order to survive being drowned in a box. That's kind of like the opening scene of the film is, him basically giving himself a trach to escape Detective Hoffman. Now, the main puzzle of this game actually is there's like 5 or 6 people locked into an underground area, and they're all there because they all participated in in some way, shape, or form in burning down a building and covering up the deaths of a bunch of people, basically. So that's kind of the gist of the story, is that Strom survives the trap. He basically has to try and figure out what's going on. He suspects Hoffman, but can't put it all together. And eventually, at the end of this, Detective Strom actually ends up dying because Hoffman outsmarts him. And then the entirety of the trap is blamed on Strom. So everybody thinks, in the world of Saw, people think that Detective Strom is an accomplice versus Hoffman, if that helps.
Yeah. See, I don't remember a lot of this. I don't claim to be a Saw expert. I do enjoy the Saw movies, but again, some of these, I don't know that I've seen them more than one time.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't get all the way through my rewatch. And Saw 5, it wasn't one of my favorites. Yeah, I mean that does spark some memory, but yeah, I'm starting to see why this ranked low for us.
That's what I was gonna say. Is that because, like you said, I personally I love the Saw movies. I have, I can find something positive about a lot of these. I think the one thing that I can find positive about this movie is that the game was unique, right?
Yeah,
Because that's something you have to think is that, and like for instance, in the previous movie Spiral, it wasn't as much of a game as it was individual occurrences of like quote unquote games. It wasn't like a group effort like normally these traps are. A lot of these traps have more than one person attached to it, whereas this one doesn't. So
yeah,
that being said, I think it's a lot less memorable because, quite frankly, it's sort of in the middle. I mean, this is actually the exact middle movie out of 9 movies, and a lot of the time when you have those middle movies, you remember the first few movies are great. The latter few movies usually kind of have like a boot and rally, but those middle movies they kind of get lost because they're usually just kind of retreading old material. So that's
yeah,
why it's in the position it's in.
yeah. I mean, and I think that's why they kind of blur to me, right? Some of these, yeah, it just feels like the material is just kind of redone, right? It's not there's not some originality. The ones that ranked a little higher and stand out a little more have a little spark of originality to them. And some of the others kind of tend to blur together a little bit. So, but anyway, that was number 8. So, Ike, take us on to our number 7 favorite of the Saw franchise.
Yes, indeed. We have Saw 3D, released October 28th, 2010, written by Patrick Melton, directed by Kevin Grutart, and starring Costas Mandylor and Tobin Bell. And it is opening weekend gross $22,530,123, and it was again good for number 1 that weekend. So, Saw 3D. I'm going to start off and say that I think I actually had this maybe a little bit lower. But basically, I don't like this movie just for the fact that it was shot in 3D. I, I have a thing about movies that are shot specifically to be in 3D. It's
Yeah.
just I don't like it. Now, here's the thing I will say. This is called Saw the Final Chapter. That's how it was also released. This was technically the final chapter of the. This was meant to be the final chapter in terms of like Tobin Bell's Jigsaw, sort of like his final plans being put into place. This movie I did quite enjoy, just for Dave, so he has kind of an idea. This movie actually takes place after all the other Saw movies. It doesn't coincide with any of them, thankfully. And the primary premise of this film is the people who are involved in the game are the people who work for the insurance company that basically denied John Kramer's treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So all the people who are in this game are people who are from the insurance companies, which, hey, I'm all for that. Insurance companies suck. Second, the previous survivors from the game, such as Dr. Gordon, there was one of the original beginning movies. There is a scene where a woman had to cut off her arm to basically give a pound of flesh as part of her game. So it has her and it has a couple other people from the other movies, which is cool. But basically, this is the final chapter. This is Detective Mark Hoffman putting into play the final game, and yeah, it's an interesting. It's overall just an interesting concept, and they bring in those old disciples who end up being part of the whole thing, and you get that last game over that you get from Dr. Gordon, who is supposedly the first victim of Jigsaw. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And again, you have to like like you said, the strike at the big insurance and all that. I get that. And that ties in. I don't know if it ties in, but it makes me think of the upcoming movie quite a bit, right? Because it focuses a lot on John's condition, right? And his seeking treatment, seeking recovery from
Actually,
it.
I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I just looked it up. I apologize, everybody. This was not the insurance company. That was a different one.
Okay, we'll scratch
This,
that then.
Yeah, scratch
See,
that. This one was the survivor who is faking being a survivor. This is the one where the guy wrote a book about
oh
surviving
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jigsaw.
yeah.
Yep. Sorry. See, this is the issue, guys. A lot of these blur together because I
They do.
guarantee the next one we talk about is probably going to be the one with the insurance company. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
But anyways, this is the one where the guy claimed that he was a survivor of Jigsaw, but it ended up not being the case. He wasn't actually a survivor of Jigsaw. He was faking it all.
yeah. Yeah, again, like you said, this is my issue. Again, I love the franchise. I love the concept as a whole, but that is my issue with a few of these movies is there's not enough spark and originality there to make them stand out to me. And that's why I have so much trouble. Even if I had rewatched all these recently, I think I would still have trouble blurring these together. It's hard to remember. I do know that Saw 3D gets a lot of hate. I do
Yeah.
know a lot of people do not like this, and a lot of people rank this very low, as we did. Um, so yeah, I mean, there is a kind of a quote unquote consensus that this is one of the weaker of the franchise, and that's that's part of the issue sometimes when you get a franchise that goes several movies is you have to come up with ideas that keep it fresh and memorable and not just retreading some stuff, or it does make it hard to remember what's what when you try to think in the grand scope of things.
Right.
Uh, so let's move on then to our number 6 uh, favorite, quote unquote, of the franchise. It is Jigsaw, released October 2017, written by Josh Stolberg and Pete Goldfinger, directed by Michael and Peter Spierig. It is starring Matt Passmore and Tobin Bell. It had an opening weekend gross of 16,640,452, which was good for number 1 for the weekend. Um, Again, I think that this is another one of those movies that gets a lot of hate as far as the Saw movies are concerned. I see this a lot of times bashed online. That the three that always hit me. It's always Spiral, Jigsaw, and Saw 3D. That for whatever reason
Yeah.
people really dislike in this franchise. I know we had Saw 5 down there too. I don't know the reception online of that, but I always as you see things, tweets, posts, what have you. These three get a lot of hate. So Ike, give us a little recap. Talk to us about Jigsaw.
Yep, absolutely. So, Jigsaw, because here's the thing, I like Jigsaw as a concept, but I don't like its implications for the overall series, which we'll talk about here in a second. Um, Jigsaw is technically the first game. So, Jigsaw is taking place both in the present time and also prior to the events of the first Saw game. And the reason we know that this takes place or due to the original Saw game is because there's a scene where they're actually constructing the reverse bear trap that Amanda wears during the first Saw film. So, ergo, this film must take place before since they are building it then. That being said, this movie basically was Jigsaw's first, and that's why it's called Jigsaw. This was Jigsaw's original game prior to the first one. And there's a lot of implications for that I feel like make the rest of the series not make as much sense. But basically, the plot of this is that there are people who are playing in the game. They keep finding bodies, and on these bodies are paraphernalia and other things that are from John Kramer. They find blood of John Kramer under the nails. John Kramer's grave is, been dug up, and there's his body's missing. So basically, they're like, someone is copycatting but making the world think that somehow John Kramer's still alive, which is obviously not the case. But the kind of long and short of it is that, again, a corrupt police detective is essentially the one who's being played here. His name's, I think, Brad Halloran. And there is he is what is it called? A mortician, I think, I cannot remember what they call it.
Coroner.
Coroner, yes. So the coroner is actually his name's Logan Nelson. Logan Nelson is actually a disciple of Jigsaw who was in the first game, and Jigsaw actually put him there because he read his X-rays wrong, which led to the delay of his diagnosis, which is a great inclusion. But Jigsaw, John Kramer, gave mercy to him because he knew it was a mistake and he knew it was not right to kill him for that simple mistake. So you do have sort of a softening of John Kramer here, where he does know mercy and that he only puts people who are deserving of the games in the games. And he what he says is that the reason we do this is not out of vengeance or fear. It is, because people deserve to be in these games. And so I like that. I like that they kind of gave the twist that like John Kramer is a human being. He has a soul. He only puts people in these games that deserve to be there, and he took mercy on the one that didn't. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the gist of it. There's a lot of other in between bullshit with this movie. I think the bad thing about this movie is that there are some implications of this being the first games that kind of retcon some things. You know what I mean? That because we never see Logan Nelson at any other point in the franchise as an accomplice other than in this film. So that obviously opens up a lot of questions, if you will.
Yeah, it's kind of a touchy area when you try to go back and do a prequel type thing or touch on things before the original movie that really set things off. You run the risk of lessening your original movie, right? And so that it's a touchy subject. And I don't know, like this movie's, it's all right. I don't like. I can't say as a blanket statement. I don't like when movies do that. We'll talk about it later, but the first movie to me is so good. It's so great as it is. I would have never touched anything but prior to that or touched anything in that realm. I do like the fact, like you said, they give him a little bit of a soul, a little bit of a reasoning behind some of this stuff, because I hold true overall, the best villains in pop culture truly believe in their mind they're doing the right thing. They truly believe that there's a reasoning behind what they're doing. They don't necessarily think what they're doing per se is wrong or evil. They can justify what they do. They can say whether it's right or wrong, whether it's twisted or not. The most memorable villains, you can I don't want to say relate. Relate may not be the right word, but you can feel that touch of, if I was in that position, what would I do? Right? Would it push me to that point? And so, adding some of that in and touching on, leaning on that, some of the medical stuff and the misdiagnosis and stuff, I get that. So, but still, if you take it in the scope of the franchise, Jigsaw, I don't know, it doesn't hold up to me as well as some of the others. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, we're moving on then. We are in the into the upper echelon here at number 5. Go ahead, Ike.
Yep, absolutely. So at number 5, we have Saw number 6. That's right. Released October 23rd, 2009, written by Patrick Melton, directed by Kevin Grutart, and then starring Costas Mandylor and Tobin Bell. Opening weekend of $14,118,444, and it is good for number 2 of that weekend. Saw 6.
I think this is our insurance one, isn't it?
Yes, this is the insurance one. This is, in fact, the one with the insurance company.
There we go.
We get there eventually. But this is also technically, this is, what's his name? John Kramer's final game. This is what John Kramer wanted to be the final game. Because he left behind a chest that had a modified, a reverse bear trap that was meant for Detective Hoffman. And he also had a bunch of envelopes with the insurance company people. And then Detective Hoffman was supposed to be the final victim of Jigsaw. But, as we know, Detective Hoffman survives this movie. But honestly, this movie, I kind of ranked it higher, simply speaking, because the people who are in the trap this time do kind of deserve it, right? You kind of think to the fact of, for-profit medicine, and, is it morally okay to deny somebody because of X, Y, or Z reason? And, so you kind of get into that moral gray area of, could you place responsibility for the death of John Kramer on these people who are essentially refusing to help him, right? And so that's kind of the question it asks you is that, this guy, the CEO of the insurance company who's involved in the trap, he's being tested because his formula says, certain people deserve to live, certain people deserve to die based on, their current health, past health, this, that, and the other, right? Mm-hmm. So he's being tested basically. Does he actually believe this? And so he's being put into situations where he has to choose between his coworkers, and typically by choosing, it hurts him as well. So there are some innocent victims, I would say, in this movie, which doesn't really, fit the operation of John Kramer, because John Kramer wouldn't put somebody in this trap who didn't deserve it. Yeah. So there were a lot of people in this who were, I would say, innocent bystanders for the most part, who just merely existed around this insurance CEO. So that is the one detractment I would have from this, is that it doesn't necessarily fit the true purpose of John Kramer. But nonetheless, it is a good movie. I think it has an interesting message. And then, of course, supposed to be the end of Detective Hoffman, but he, of course, escapes narrowly.
Yeah, again, like we started to say earlier, it's hard not to relate to that dislike of big insurance and those things. Like you said, there, you can see some of the purpose, the intent behind John's motives and what's going on. This is where I think we start to get into the movies in my mind where it still has that originality, right? It still has the sparks of original, whether it be the traps or whether it be the concepts. This is where the blur clarifies a little bit, right? And it's a little more distinct in the meaning behind the movies, and they're not kind of retreading as much. I know that's odd to say for a movie that was the sixth one, but I feel like they kind of hit on it, right? This is a decent movie in the franchise. Not what I would call great, but it's okay. And again, it's still wild because depending on your position, depending on your aspect, there is some relatability to John, and if and I like that though. It's like, if you were in that position, would you if you had the capability, would you not do that? Would you not feel the same way? How many times have people said, man, I would like to whatever, and so, and I think that adds depth to the character and to the franchise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on, we're to number 4 in our favorite movies in the Saw franchise. It is Saw 2, released October 28th, 2005, written by Lee Wannell and Darren Lynn Bousman, directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, starring Donnie Wahlberg, Tobin Bell, and Shawnee Smith. Opening weekend, it grossed $31,725,652, which was good for number 1 for the weekend. Saw 2 is where we're getting down. We're getting down to where it all started. This is at number 4, but it's a pretty solid movie. You got Donnie Wahlberg in there. You still got I can't remember, what is Shawnee Smith? Is it Amber? Is that her name? Her character's name?
Oh, Shawnee Smith. It's Amanda.
Amanda, that's right. Okay, sorry. This is where we're kind of that core of where it started, and again, it's a pretty good movie. It's drew a lot in the box office. But as you look at this franchise as a whole, even the movies that are bad, these movies always performed. They were always top 3 on opening weekends. So the franchise as a whole draws. But this is when it was still fresh, right? This was coming off the heels of the first movie, which was really kind of eye-opening, and really kind of turned people's heads a little bit. So Ike, talk to us a little bit about Saw 2.
Yes, Saw 2. So, as Dave said, this is definitely in the upper echelons of our rankings, and for a good reason. This, I think we'll talk about it a little bit, but not to say that this was a bad movie. This just wasn't our most favorite of the Saw movies. The other ones had other, other redeeming qualities that put them above this. But the thing about Saw 2 is that, to me, the Saw 2 was a perfect sequel in a lot of ways. It had a very meaningful game. A lot of the people in the game, they had a way out, but basically John Kramer was banking on the fall of humanity here, where, all of these people are going to try and look out for themselves. They're common criminals, all put away by the same person, which was Donnie Wahlberg's character. Donnie Wahlberg's character in this case is Eric Matthews, Detective Eric Matthews, and his son is also inside of this game. So the game is taking place like at a rundown, like what I would imagine is a crack house essentially, and essentially the premise of this is that all the people within this are put away by Eric Matthews. At some point or another, Eric Matthews is a crooked cop. Again, these movies have a very long-running trope of basically punishing crooked cops, so take that for what you will. But Eric Matthews is a crooked cop who planted evidence, lied on the stand, and basically his only thing he needs to do is wait there with John Kramer for I think it's like an hour or something like that. And that's all he has to do. And but he doesn't. He doesn't do that because of whatever reason. And in this case, the reason he doesn't do is because he's trying to find his son. Well, the whole purpose of the game is to punish Eric Matthews. His son is in the game. His son is in constant danger. And the ultimate twist of this is that his son is alive and basically in the original place that they found John Kramer, in a safe. But basically Eric Matthews being, too hard-headed and jumping the gun and being violent, he took Jigsaw away and basically got trapped himself. So it has a very interesting, conversation about, well, all he had to do was wait and his answers would have been provided to him, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't wait. And John Kramer knew he wouldn't. So, but John Kramer in this one is very ill, so he's very, weak and feeble. And basically, this is basically where we have confirmation that there are other people who are working with John Kramer, namely Amanda, because we see her acting on his behalf. So, great movie, great, findings in this movie. There were a lot of really cool, oh wow, this is a revelation and everything else. So, very much one of my favorites, I would say, Saw 2.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. Again, I enjoy Wahlberg, despite his New Kids on the Block past. But yeah, it's again, like I said, I still feel like at this, obviously this is, this being the second movie, the originality is still there, right? It's not been worn out. They're not retreading, not, repurposing anything per se. So it still feels, exciting and fresh. So I think that's why, it's again in our top 4.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Ike, let's go on to our number 3 ranking.
Yes, indeed. Our number 3 just so happens to be number 3. Saw number 3, released October 27, 2006. It is written by Leigh Whannell and James Wan. Sorry about mispronounced his name. And it is directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, and it is starring Tobin Bell, Shawnee Smith, and Angus McFadden. Opening weekend gross $33,610,391. Good for a numero uno for the weekend. So, Saw 3. Saw 3, in my opinion, is one of the best in the franchise. Saw 3, for good reason, has a lot of positives to it. Saw 3 happens at the same time as Saw 4. In fact, between Dave and I's rankings, Saw 3 and 4 were technically ranked the same, which honestly is sort of poetic because they are happening at the same time. So, Saw 3, specifically, is telling the story of two separate people who we think are separate people. We have a doctor who is kidnapped.
Yep.
Her name's Dr. Lynn Denlin, and then we have Jeff, who is also kidnapped, separately. So Dr. Lynn Denlin is a doctor who's being put into this position to help John Kramer because he has an inoperable brain tumor. He's having a lot of complications, so she has to basically keep him alive. If not, the shotgun collar around her neck will blow off and basically revoke her brain privileges. Um, and basically, Jeff is there because his son was killed, and his son was killed by I believe, a drunk driver. And he is basically going through the steps to confront the people who are tertiarily responsible for his son's death. I think like one of them is the woman who like saw the accident but like drove away and didn't testify. One of them is the lawyer of the drunk driver, and then ultimately leading to the drunk driver himself. So it's a very unique conversation about like everything that happened and all of that. So and the even more poetic thing about this is at the very end, basically I think John Kramer reveals that he was the one that hit his kid, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
So I was trying to remember that. Yeah, okay, we're good. Sorry, I was making sure I was remembering the right movie again. Jesus Christ. So then, in addition to that, we find out that Dr. Lynn Denlin and Jeff are actually husband and wife.
Yeah.
So you find out that Lynn Denlin has been cheating on her husband, everything else. So they're both being tested, but all of them are part of a grander test, and that grander test is for Amanda. Amanda is ultimately the one who is being tested here because all she had to do was let Lynn go, and she would be tested. Because John knew that if Amanda did not let Lynn go and killed her, that she would in turn die as soon as Jeff entered the room. And then the final icing on the cake was all Jeff had to do was walk away and let John Kramer live, and his wife could have potentially lived. But Jeff could not move past his anger, his frustration, and everything else, and his wife died. So that is Saw 3.
Yeah, I really like Saw 3. We talked about the originality of the first. I like this one. This to me, ultimately, I always think this is the Amanda movie, right? This is where she gets to step up. She shows her involvement in this. There's those parts where she's impatient, right? She wants to just jump the gun because she's so intent on John being kept alive that she almost loses track of the quote unquote master plan, right? The plan and the ideals and the traps. And so there's a lot riding on that. I love the concept of taking the doctor. I love how they tie it all together with her and Jeff, and the kid and the drunk driver. I love how it all ties together. When you're watching it, and it feels like these different stories going on, but they're really wind up being just kind of one big story with different layers, different chapters. I feel like this movie is a good example of what the Saw franchise is. Yes. It is of the overall the intent behind what John's doing, the people working with John, the purpose of what he's doing, the multiple things that he's trying to accomplish, multiple stories going on, but yet these multiple stories all end up coming into one big picture. I feel like this one really, really encapsulates that a lot into a movie, and is a really a prime example of what this franchise is and can be. And the to me, at least from a viewer standpoint, of what the thinking behind the movies are, and the ideal as a whole for this franchise, I think this is one of those that you can put up there as when people say, what is this Saw franchise? And you can show them this, and this is a really good example of what it's all about overall.
Yep. I would 100% agree with that. 100% agree with that.
So here we are. We're moving on to the top 2. And at number 2, it is Saw 4, released October 26, 2007, written by Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan. It was directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, starring Tobin Bell, Scott Patterson, and Costas Mandalore. I'm pretty sure that I'm pronouncing his name differently every time, but I apologize for that. Opening weekend gross $31,756,764, which again was good for number one for the weekend. Ike, give us a recap of Saw 4.
All right. So Saw 4 again happens at the same time as Saw 3. Technically, the movie starts at the end of the movie, technically. So the beginning of Saw 4 is also the end. So at the beginning of Saw 4, we see the autopsy of John Kramer. So autopsy is really cool, actually, very realistic looking. And it reveals a wax-coated microcassette in his stomach. And basically, it is shown to Detective Hoffman, who is being told that the games have just begun. So there's a lot of cool stuff about this movie, but essentially, this game is testing. I think it's a SWAT agent named Rig. So Officer Rig is the object of this game. Officer Rig is basically, he is being tested because his whole thing is that he always runs in, guns blazing. He cares not for himself, not for his family, not for his partners. He basically just wants to run in, get the job done, save his friends, whatever else. So the whole concept here is that Rig is being tested. But Rig is being tested in sort of a different way than we've seen so far, and I think this is part of the reason why this ranked high. But the reason is a little bit better than some of the other movies is that Rig is being put into the position of John Kramer, and he's basically having to punish people to see that sometimes in order to save someone, you must put them in that predicament. And that they also must save themselves. So the whole concept of this is that Rig must save people by letting them save themselves. There's a series of traps that he's not actually directly involved in. They're basically just people who are in traps. Once they get them out of the traps or once they die, it leads them to the next trap. And then Rig basically hops from trap to trap, seeing these dead bodies, uncovering these dead bodies, uncovering survivors of these people, putting people into traps, and eventually he gets to his final destination where he's told that his friends are there, which we learn in this movie that from the second movie, oh my god, what's his name? Eric, I cannot remember his last name, but Eric, the cop, that was Eric Matthews. He's still alive, and Mark Hoffman has also been kidnapped, and they're being put into this game by another participant of the game, whose name is, I think, Trevor. So, no, his name's Art. He was John Kramer's wife's lawyer. But anyways, it's a whole thing. There's a lot of mixing parts here. But the point of this is that Riggs is being tested, and he ultimately fails, which leads to Eric Matthews dying. And we also learn that Mark Hoffman is a accomplice and a student of Jigsaw. So this is the first movie where we learn of Mark Hoffman, who basically becomes the pinnacle and point of the rest of the movies.
Yeah, it's like you said, kind of a little bit of a transition, but it's still, again, like we've talked about this whole thing. This still has the freshness and the originality. I think the top four movies, the first four movies, which we had ranked in the top four in a different order, but are pretty good, right? They stand strong. They still have that freshness, that originality. I don't know if, from a writing standpoint, maybe that's what they envisioned, right? 4 or 5 movies, and then because of the success, they had to keep going and come up with stuff. And that's maybe why we felt that retread starting to happen. Because, like I said, these first 4 or so movies still feel like there's a big picture, a big story in mind, and it feels kind of fresh and original. It's again a fun movie. 3 and 4 are pretty close to me. I really love 3, but 4 is fun too. But they go hand in hand, like you talked about, and it's kind of hard to separate the two when you talk about them and watch them. So a good movie, but only good enough for number 2, because there can only be one number 1 in all aspects. So Ike, tell us what, if everybody hasn't not playing along at home and hasn't written it down and figured out what we ranked as the number 1 of our favorite of the Saw franchise.
Absolutely. Like you said, unless people are not paying attention, Our number one is number one, Saw, the 2004 original film. Saw is the story of two contestants in this wonderful game. Both can win, but will both win? That's the question. But the two people are, we talked about Dr. Lawrence Gordon. Dr. Gordon is probably a pretty popular, I would say, contestant here because he's played by Cary Ells, who is widely known for his time with the Princess Diaries. And, it's, is that the right, did I say that right, Princess Diaries?
I believe so.
Okay, just making sure. Making sure I'm not crazy.
Well, you are, but I don't know if
Princess Bride, not Princess Diaries.
Oh, there you go.
Princess Diaries is that movie with Anne Hathaway.
I was thinking Princess Bride, too, but it's so odd. I was thinking the right movie, but for some reason you said Princess Diaries. Oh, that was weird.
Yeah, no, he was not in the movie with Anne Hathaway and whatever the old woman's name is. I promise you.
He was in the movie with Andre the Giant.
That's right. So, anyways, Cary Ells was in this movie. And also, weirdly enough, the other person that is the other contestant, I keep saying contestant, victim here, Adam, is played by none other than Leigh Whannell, which I thought was always so cool. I found this out later in life, but I was like, wow, Leigh Whannell just does whatever he wants. Yep. But anyways, Leigh Whannell, he stars in this as well. It's really cool. They're the two people locked in a room, chained to pipes, with a dead body in the middle of the floor. And they basically have to, it's a closed circuit kind of like movie, which in my opinion makes this movie so fantastic. They're stuck in this one room. It gives you that claustrophobic feel. And there's a lot of stuff going on around them. And it gets really creative with sort of the play of this game, how things, operate from moment to moment. And ultimately, I think this one has some of the more creative filming techniques because it was relatively low budget. I think the big thing too is that we have a lot of really creative games, such as the reverse bear trap that Amanda's stuck in, which this is the first appearance of Amanda. At this point, we technically, unless we're counting the doctor from Jigsaw, well, technically, I guess Amanda would have also been a part of the games at this point. Anyways, I'm getting too convoluted here. John Kramer is the mastermind. He keeps the two people in the room. I didn't say the budget for this one, but the budget was really low, and it didn't gross as much as some of the other movies. And it was only number 3 for the weekend. I also didn't mention any of the people who made this movie, so that's my bad. But the point that I'm getting to here is that this original film, closed circuit room, detective is trying to figure out who the Jigsaw killer is. We see some faces that we'll see in later films. But for the most part, a lot of the people who are in this film die in this film, which is kind of cool. It really opened it up for other stuff later. And this movie, in my opinion, has the best ending of any of the Saw movies. We see John Kramer rising from the bloody pile in the middle of the room, and he looks to Adam and says, "There's a key in the tub." And Adam has that realization that he's fucked. He can't get out of here now. And John Kramer goes to the door, game over, shuts it, and that's it. And the last thing you hear is Adam screaming during the credits of the film. Which is great.
This, I'll tell you what, this movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is so good. You can say what you want about the rest of the franchise. You can say what you want about the other 8 movies that are in existence right now. This movie, to me, was groundbreaking. There was nothing that had been done like this before, to this level at least. And I would challenge, you said one of the best movies of the Saw franchise, one of the best endings of the Saw franchise. This is one of the best endings of any horror movie in my eyes. Because this is one of those movies that you wish you could go back and watch for the first time again, and have no memories of it, and see that, because that ending when he stands up just blows your mind, and you're like, fuck. I mean, it's just like that first time you watch it and you see that, you don't see it coming. I don't care how good Monica is excellent at predicting the ends of movies, right, and knowing where it's going. She didn't know, right? It blew her mind. This is one of those movies you don't see that. You don't see it coming, and it blows your mind when he stands up towards the end. This movie, um, man, it is. I don't know. I cannot sing the praises of it enough. It really, when I looked at the numbers and that the gross was a little low and it only did, I was kind of a little surprised. Um, I know this movie did exceptionally well in the rental world after, obviously, and whatnot, but it holds true. When people want to see a kind of this kind of horror movie with some gore and some, kind of makes you think and it will kind of blow your mind, this is one of the best movies to hold up there and show somebody. Um, it is groundbreaking. It is original. I mean, this movie literally spawned these other 8, almost 9 now, coming out soon, sequels that are essentially, in one capacity or another, just a spin-off retelling of this first movie, right? If this first movie hadn't done it so well and established this foundation and this concept of the puzzles and what's going on in the games, I mean, all these other movies, yes, there's different levels of originality, but they're all still spun out and retelling this first movie in some way or another. And the fact that you can, I mean, there's certain movies that have this many sequels that are still, whether you like them or you don't like them, and your varying degrees, still trying to chase that first one, right? I mean, almost all these franchises that are long running, whether it be Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, whatever it is, there are different movies that are really, really, really good, but they all pale just a touch to that original in the feel, the concept, or whatever. Saul's right up there with them. Whether again, I like the Saw 3. And I like Saw 2 and 4 and some of these others different degrees, but they still all pale to that first one. There's something special about this first movie. And I love this movie. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen it. And it still makes me smile when you see that, even when you know it's coming and you know where it's going.
Right.
Because when you see it, you remember how much it blew your mind that first time and how, the jaw dropping it was. It was, because it was different. It was original. We talked about it before when we discussed found footage, that, Blair Witch Project, when it first came out, was different, right? It was something unique before that had become a trope. And Saw's the same way, right? There's lots of movies that do this prisoner trapped in a puzzle. You have to answer these questions and play the game to get out. Whether we discussed not too long ago, whatever, The Cube and all these other movies. Ideal wise, a lot of these spin out of the concept of Saw. Saw established this someone waking up in a unique situation, trying to figure out where the hell they are and how to get out of it. And I'm not saying necessarily, because I don't know, that they were the first per se to do it, but they were probably the first to do it at this level.
Yeah.
And there are, there are handfuls of movies that establish characters that become part of pop culture, that establish a concept that becomes this ingrained in horror movies. Saw's one of those movies. That it establishes things that become tropes. I mean, you see what is it? Billy the Puppet? Is that his name? Billy?
I believe so.
You see that, what it is. It hits on you and it evokes some of memory. That is an iconic image, an iconic character in horror movies. And it's all because of this first movie. And again, it achieves the numbers. The numbers don't tell the impact on horror that this first movie had.
Absolutely.
I really, really, really feel that. And I find it as one of the most perfect horror movies ever made in my eyes. It is a great, great movie to watch. It has everything. It makes you think. It makes you cringe. It makes you jump. It blows your mind at the end the first time you watch it. It has everything that you want in a horror movie. And at this time, when we're watching it, you don't have that sympathy for John yet. He's just a villain,
Yeah,
right?
just a
He's
crazy
just
dude.
he's just a weird ass that's done something. You don't have some of that sympathy and some of that backstory yet. So when you watch the first one without the others, it has that badass villain that's just fucked up what you think at that time. You don't have the full picture of it. So, um, I know some of these movies I've not seen as much of the others, and I couldn't really talk on them as much. This one though, man, I love this movie. Absolutely love this movie, and I will forever love the Saw franchise just based on this movie alone. Um, it's so good, so good, and when I still watch it, even knowing all the blow your mind moments and whatever, it's still good. It's still a great movie to watch.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, before we get, wrapped up here, the thing that I think that a lot of people, hate about the Saw movies is just the fact that they're essentially just made for people who like gore. Um, and that's what a lot of people say is like, Saw is just for people who like gore. You know what I mean? It's just a bunch of gore, gore, gore. And a lot of the later movies are like that. A lot of later movies are just trying to, go above and beyond what the last movie did. Try and do something that's even, is more sketchy than the last movie. Do something that's more crazy than the last movie. Try and one up the last movie. But the beauty of these early movies, specifically like Saw 1, is that there's no expectation. This is the original film. This is where it all started. This is the groundwork. And I think that's why I think Saw X, relative to Saw 1, is going to do really well because this is going to possibly root some of those things that we didn't get until later Saw movies into an earlier, or quote unquote, earlier entry, because it's going to sort of jump back in time a little bit. So, Saw 1 was so fantastic because of how it started. It's laying the groundwork for this franchise. And I think that as we get closer to seeing Saw X, I think that Saw X is going to be fantastic because it's sort of going back to the roots of Saw. It's going back to John Kramer, who, in my opinion, is the heart and soul of Saw.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the reason why some of those later movies aren't so good, because John Kramer is absent for obvious reasons. He's dead. But I think that when movies include John Kramer to some respect or pay homage to John Kramer in some way, the movies tend to be better. They tend to be more closely related to the original source and the heart of the material. So, yeah, Saw 1 is fantastic, nearly perfect. And I think that's why the earlier movies are so good and why they're ranked highly, and why I think Saw X will end up being ranked pretty high too, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, right? I love the John Kramer character. I love what he is, and even I know they always try to keep his fingerprint in there, and they always try to tie back a little, but sometimes there is a bit of a stretch, right? And you feel like, it's whatever. How many times can you try to say there's a tie here? But now that you're putting this movie back into the timeline earlier on where he's there, I'm all for it. I'm more excited for this one than I have, been for any of them in a while, to see how this plays out. I can't wait to watch the movie. And again, next episode, we'll be talking about it. So, but let's take a quick break here. Now that we've completed the rankings, and when we come up, we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about Saw X and our anticipation for it, and close out the show. Listen to Their Screams is now a Fangoria collaborator. Get 20% off your order at shop.fangoria.com by using the promo code LISTEN2SCREAMS at checkout. That is listen, the number 2, and screams. Or you can click the link in the show notes. All right, and we're back here on Listen to the Screams. That was our ranking of the 9 Saw movies in the franchise and how we see them. And in next episode, of course, we will be reviewing Saw X. We'll be going to see it coming out. As of the day of release of this, it'll be coming out in some theaters the night of the day of release of this, and in other it'll be the day after. but we will be talking about it, and once we review it, we'll give a little concept of, hey, where would we throw this in then into this ranking? Where would this fall? My anticipation and hopes, my gut feeling says, hey, it'll land pretty high. I feel like I'm going to enjoy this more than some of these lower ranked movies, but we'll see. Right? They've got to deliver. They've got my attention. They've got my interest with the concept, the time period, and what they're doing here. But now they have to deliver on that. So we'll see. And I like the fact that from what we've seen in the trailers, it feels like there's a lot of John at his core, still kind of developing what he's doing a little bit. You know what I mean? It's uh, kind of getting his footing on what he's doing with some of this stuff. So I'm highly anticipating this movie. Ike, tell me about you and your anticipation.
Yeah, I think kind of what we talked about. I think the best thing about this movie and the best thing that the Saw franchise could have done is go back to the roots. And in this case, the primary root of all of Saw is John Kramer. And after Saw 4, John Kramer was distinctly absent from a lot of the movies and a lot of the entries just because they might fit him in as a small little nod or, something to that respect. But for the most part, substantially speaking, John Kramer's not a pinnacle part of any of the later movies. So I think that this movie is going to take us back. It's going to take us back to the originality of Saw. It's going to take us back to John Kramer. And I think that we're going to get a John Kramer that we haven't seen before. We're going to see a more vindictive John Kramer who is getting back at people who wronged him. And I think that this is going to put a very interesting light on the situation because clearly, these people do deserve to be in the games. In terms of the cinematic universe, I'm not, judge, jury, and executioner, but based on John Kramer's rules, they do deserve to be in the games because they have purportedly done this to other people, not just John Kramer. So I think that's something that's going to be important to remember, as I think that this is going to be sort of a sparking point to make him even what I would say even more vindictive towards those who have wronged him. And I think that we're going to see a lot of creativity with the traps, and I think that Tobin Bell is going to have a larger role in this movie, just because based on the trailer, it feels like he's going to be more interactive with the games. Whereas in the first one, he really wasn't a huge part of the games itself. He was just there. And in later movies, he was sick, so he didn't really have a hands-on role outside of just being the mastermind. So I think that we're going to see him being more of a hands-on participant in these games, which is going to be great. I think it's going to be a version of John Kramer we've never seen before, which will, in turn, make it a very, very good movie.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the vibe I get from watching the trailers and stuff, it feels much more like John Kramer, almost in the hero-like role, almost, right? Like a vigilante type role. It's hard not to be sympathetic for him. And again, some of that can play, right? Some of the best villains, you have a little sympathy for them. There's a little relatability there. That's why, because you can relate. Hey, if I was in that position, would I not go off the rails as much as he did? But it's hard, right? When what happened, he thought he was going somewhere for a treatment. He thought it was going to help him. He thought it had helped him, to find out they really didn't do anything, right? They hadn't done anything. It's hard not to say, yeah, I'd be pissed too. And if I was sitting here looking at this life-ending disease, would I not say, why not? Right? I got nothing to lose. I'm going to die anyway. Let's get some vengeance. It's right. It's almost right, Batman-like almost, right? You killed my parents. I'm going to vow to get some vengeance for the wrongdoings. So we'll see how that parlays into the movie. But it's almost hard not to, when you watch the trailers, to to feel very sympathetic and to feel almost like, hey, he's almost the hero of the movie, right? In a dark kind of way. These doctors and these people that supposedly helped him are more the villain than he is. So that's interesting. I'll be curious because again, that is very much to me at the heart of these movies. So I'll be curious to see how that parlays over into the full movie.
Yeah.
And again, where does this fall? Does this fall between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3? I'm having trouble remembering.
From what I've read, it takes place immediately after Saw 1. So basically,
Okay.
Saw 1 happens, and then this happens. But I think that we see him going to, like, the doctor and stuff. So I think it's, like, part of it's, like, immediately after, and then there's probably, like, a little bit of a break, and then, like, picks up type deal.
Yeah, so it'll be curious again to see how it ties then, how it bridges and leads to Saw 2 and what they do with that. So again, I'm excited. We're just by the time you're hearing this, we're there. It's time to come out. But the next episode, we will be reviewing this movie, Saw X, and again, we will revisit and see. We're not going to talk about the whole rankings, but part of our review, we will say, hey, where would this drop into this ranking that we have established here of our favorites? Where do we feel now that would fall? I'm very much looking forward to it. So make sure you don't miss that. And in order for you to not miss it, you have to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform.
Yes.
And wherever you are, make sure you subscribe. And if possible, rate and review us. That helps us in those algorithms. Helps us to come up as a suggested listen for people that are listening to other similar film review and horror podcasts. Like we've talked about all the time, and we haven't quite mentioned it as much this episode as we usually do. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms that Listen to Screams. Listen, the number 2 in Screams. We're sharing all kinds of stuff. And it's imperative now this week because we really didn't touch on our usual news and anniversaries and so on in this episode. So those will still be on social media this coming week, right? We will still do that research, still look those things up. So you won't hear these things. So make sure you're following us on social media because we'll still be posting those up in the coming week leading to the next episode. So that's it. That's our review of the Saw franchise. Super excited to see Saw X and review it in the next episode. Like I said, more than likely we'll have a wives rebuttal, which is always a hit with the listeners. They always like when the wives come on and give their opinions. They are very opinionated. So more than likely that is forthcoming. So Ike, before we close out and get out of here, anything you want to add?
I don't think so. Other than the fact that I'm immensely excited for Saw X, and unrelated but kind of related, I have a free popcorn for my birthday, so I'm probably going to eat that too. So I love me some popcorn and soda, so I'm ready.
Yeah, nothing like seeing a movie you want to see and not having to pay for the popcorn.
Amen.
That's always a good thing. Again, this is a year of highlights. There's a lot of good, big, anticipated movies coming out. This is definitely one of the highest points for us. This is exciting. Fingers crossed it doesn't let us down. I've got good feelings. I got good vibes. I always go into these things with a positive attitude and hope for the best. And so far, there's been nothing out there that has made me second guess that. I'm very hopeful. I'm really excited, and you'll get to hear though what we thought after viewing next episode. But until then, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and have many pleasant nightmares.